So after all your time, all your effort, all your blood, sweat, and tears getting your bachelor's degree, this is what you're going to wind up with. You're going to get basically a piece of paper. It's a really fancy looking piece of paper. And when you walk across the stage, they're not even going to hand it to you. They're going to give you a proxy for this piece of paper. You'll come back and get the piece of paper yourself. So it turns out it's a very important piece of paper. I would frame it if I was you. If you get it, frame it, treat it with reverence, because you work really, really hard to earn it, and it says something about you. What it says to potential future employers is that, at very minimum, you took 120 credit hours, which meant you had at least 40 different instructors, which you could look at as supervisors, right? And if you had 40 different supervisors and they each gave you a set of criteria for how to succeed in their class, we have 2 or 3 more seats over there, people in the hall, if you'd like to come in, then you did at least 70% of that. And that's no small thing, right? You had 40 people give you 40 sets of criteria, and you were able to do at least 70% worth of credit in there, and it led you to this, which says that you have endurance, you have persistence, you have intelligence, and you have the ability to work within criteria set to accomplish goals. All things that employers want in future employees. A bachelor's degree, like I said, is an important accomplishment, but I liken it to the high school diploma of the 1940s. In the 1940s, almost nobody went past 8th grade. We were transitioning to an industrialized society. World War II propelled us there much more quickly, but we had largely an agrarian society, and most people went to 8th grade. So if you went through 12th grade, then you had 4 more years of education than most everybody else, right? And if you got that level of education, finishing 12th grade, that gave a person, usually a male, as we'll see, there's been some biases for eons, and those are being erased, but not quickly and not completely. That gave you 4 more years academic training than the average person on the street. And so that would get you an entry-level position in almost any company from which you could then move up the ladder, right? So you got in on the ground floor. You didn't start at the top. Today now, almost everybody gets 12 years of school. Either you're going to get the high school diploma or the graduate equivalency degree or diploma or certificate. Either one is fine from my point of view. I've got some good friends and family that got a GED. It doesn't really matter, but you've got to have a baseline level of education to get almost any job in America now. Not all of them, but most of them. So how do you distinguish yourself now from the average person on the street? You get 4 more years of school, which then involves getting a bachelor's degree, which is almost required these days to get a good job, depending on your definition of good job. Other avenues, as we'll see, are open to you nonetheless. But if you want to distinguish yourself then from the bachelor's level person, you got to do that with a graduate education, at least within the realm of academia. So, you know, having this diploma for your bachelor's degree is going to allow you to apply for jobs that you otherwise wouldn't even be qualified to apply for. That'll get you in on the ground floor from which you can work your way up. However, there are other levels in organizations that you may not be able to even apply for without higher levels of education. The higher up you go, the better off you are. It turns out, at least by 2000 census data, about 1 in 4 people in Tennessee had a bachelor's degree. So we'll see how that translates into greater job security. It's a small group of people. By 2010 census, and I haven't looked at the data, it may be, or excuse me, it was 1 in 5 people. It may be up to 1 in 4. But it's not a lot of people, proportionally speaking. So getting this degree, while it doesn't make you a better human being than anybody else, certainly puts you in a group of people that have distinguished themselves by accomplishing more education than the average person does. Thus, they have the ability to apply for certain kinds of jobs. Now, don't confuse, as I've alluded to, an education with human value. It will open doors, but it does not make you a good person. There are a lot of people who have no education whatsoever, incredibly intelligent people, very successful in their own right, and they're wonderful human beings. There are plenty of people with PhDs, MDs, all the Ds you care to name, who are jerks, and you wouldn't want to hang out with them to eat dinner. So it doesn't mean that you're a good person, nor does it mean you're lesser than if you don't have these kinds of accomplishments. However, these kinds of accomplishments do translate into opening doors or the lack thereof. Generally speaking, the more education you get, the more money you can make. So we look at these numbers, and these numbers here are from 2000, so they're old, but the proportions roughly hold out. High school, this is an annual income, average annual income, earnings and education, and so we say that's $26,200. Well, that's not starting salary, right? That's everybody that's got just that as a level of education, right? So you have a total group from age, 16 probably up to age 80, and on average they make $26,000 a year. 2-year degree by itself, and you're up to $33,000. 4-year degree, and you're up to $42,000. You see where this is going, right? Well, it goes beyond there. If you get the master's degree, $52,000, a doctoral degree, $70,000, and a professional degree, lawyer, medical doctor, something of that nature, $81,000 on average. So it's a pretty broad range that brings us to this average, but of course you see the trend is pretty clear. So it is advantageous. Over a lifetime, that adds up. On a yearly basis, it's pretty clear to see that, hey, that looks good. But less than high school, you're talking about a little less than $1 million in a lifetime. And these are in 2009 dollars. And I've got the, I'll try to make this PowerPoint available. I've got the citations for all these graphs and figures that I'm using. You probably won't be able to see them on video, but I did not make most of them. I found them on the internet where you could also find them. So while they may not be entirely public domain, I do cite my sources. Less than high school, you're looking at a little less than $1 million over the course of your lifetime. Get a high school diploma and bam, you're jumping up to $1.3 million. Get some college, but no degree, and you're up to 1.5. Get just that 2 years associate's degree, and you're at 1.7 versus less than $1 million. This education thing does pay off in time. Bachelor's degree, $2.2 million. Master's degree, $2.6 million. Doctoral degree, $3.2 million. Professional degree, $3.6 million over a lifetime. And you got to keep in mind that these are averages, and they vary from year to year in terms of how you look at your dollars, inflation, and things of that nature. Bachelor's degrees don't pay too badly. But in terms of field, the market will determine how much you can get paid with your bachelor's degree. So you can see that there's the broadest range and the highest attainable salary with a bachelor's degree within engineering. And this is an interesting source, the Chronicle, when you go to chronicle.com, and what it does is it will break out for you all the different types of engineering that then range from what appears to be $55,000 to $120,000. Now you look across here, and what you will see is psychology and social work actually have the bottommost number for the bachelor's degree. Education ain't far ahead of it. So we talk a lot in our country about how we value education. But when you value something, you usually invest in it, right? And so it's interesting we have a dichotomy between what people espouse as a value and what they actually back up with in terms of investment. We don't invest greatly in our educational system. However, if you invest yourself in the higher educational system, you can find jobs across the board that will be better for you in terms of matching your interests and paying you back over the long haul. So these are based on the 2000 numbers, thinking of a 40-year career, for example, very broadly, age, say, 25 to 65, and that doesn't take into account people who will be parents primarily, or people who come into or out of the job market or work part-time for extended periods. But on average, a 40-year career, we're looking at, just graduate high school, you're looking at $5,000 a year extra. Get in some college and you're looking at $12,500 a year extra. That's an extra $500,000 in your lifetime. Get the 2-year degree, that's extra $15,000 a year. And get your 4-year degree, and you're looking at an extra $27,500 a year. That's a $1.1 million boost in your lifetime. And, you know, I made these slides a ways back, so I know that flat screen TVs don't cost $5,000 anymore. But you get the idea. Just substitute anything that's cool that would cost $5,000 now, and you get the general gist of where I'm going with that. Extra $12,500 a year. All right? Visuals help sometimes. Extra $15,000 a year. Not bad. Extra $27,500 a year. Maybe even better. So you can see that the higher up you go, the better off you are financially. However, most people will end up on one of these things right here. They are priceless but very expensive to maintain. So you won't be getting a new car every year. You're going to be paying out for diapers and clothes and school supplies and fees, and you know how it goes. But that's, hey, I'll take one of those over a car any day. Well, not anymore. I mean, I don't want another one. I like the two I got, and they were awesome. And they're expensive. But check it out. So the more education, not only the more money you make, but the greater the job security, as I alluded. You can see the graph over here, median weekly earnings, and that's in 2010 dollars. Go up, 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 up. This is weekly earnings. As higher up you go with your education. But unemployment decreases rather dramatically as you go up. So we talk about 9% unemployment, 10% unemployment, back down to 8% unemployment. Unemployment numbers are really hard to get a true metric of, accurate metric of. However, what you can say over the broad sweep is that people who have less than, right, a bachelor's degree account for 75% of all those unemployed. Does that mean that everybody with a bachelor's degree got a job? No. Does it mean they got the job they want? No. But it means they're more likely to have a job, and substantially more likely to have a job. And the higher up you go, when you get up into professional degrees and doctoral degrees, you see that the unemployment is actually quite low. If I wanted another job doing what I do now, they're not just growing on trees. I can't go get another professor's job working at a college because there are not that many of them, and those that exist already have people filling those positions. However, if I wanted to include the entire country in my search, I could find another job. I could also go into professional practice. I could also do research full-time. I could do consulting. I could work for another organization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have flexibility at higher levels of education, which means I am more able to find a job because there are certain jobs that only people with these degrees can fill, and it turns out there's not many people, relatively speaking, with that type of education. Now, I don't expect you to follow all of this, but increases in job security for those with a college degree appear to be very stable across time. So this graph here, Stimulus Jobs 2009, which is a workforce report from Georgetown University, we have going all the way back to 1970, right? And when we're looking across here, we see that the red line is people with less than 4 years of high school. 4 or more years of high school but no college is this next line down. Some college between 1 and 3 years is the green line, and the black line is bachelor's degree and above. And that's from 1970 to 2008. And you see that those trends hold. They change. You see joblessness spikes at times when we go into recessions. I put this little thing on myself at the bottom just to let people know who are pretty rabid one way or the other politically. I'm rabidly independent as a political stance. But Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and of course it hasn't gone into the Obama years, which obviously we are in the middle of a pretty strong recession at the time that we're talking. But it isn't about Republican and Democrat. Economies do what they do, right? You could throw policies at it all day, but it turns out that many of the forces which move the economy are beyond manipulation in terms of direct policy control. And so what you see is that having greater education gives you insurance no matter who's in charge of your Oval Office or what kind of economy we happen to find ourselves in. And so I think that shows pretty clearly that the investment in education is well worth it on average. Why more money and greater job security? As I alluded, because more education means you have more knowledge in a smaller area, which equates to expertise, right? You know more about less, right? And if anybody wants to know about that small area in which you know lots, you're the go-to person, right? We go to people. I go to a mechanic to fix my car. That is not my area of expertise. I go to somebody with that area of expertise, and I pay them a substantial rate to give me their skills and knowledge set. And that's the way it is regardless of what kind of job we're talking about. Doesn't matter. If I go and want some kind of medical help, I'm going to another specialist. Then that's what you're doing essentially, is making yourself more and more specialized. About 1 in 5 people stay in the career, in the field in which they get their bachelor's degree. which is to say careers change over time. The bachelor's degree may get you in the door, but it doesn't mean that's necessarily what you're going to do for your entire life. But be mindful that you can launch careers in different directions from wherever you happen to be, especially if you got the foundation of an education, because that gives you that baseline that people go, hey, you've got a minimal amount of training and obvious levels of acquiring knowledge that we would value, and thus we're willing to hire you. The more experience you get, the better you can market yourself. I was in a bank once, and I was just standing in line, and one of the tellers was behind the counter, and a friend of hers came in, and her friend's like, hey, how you doing? She's like, not too good, loud as everybody could hear it, right? And she's like, why, what's wrong? She's like, I can't even find a job. And I'm like, ooh, that's probably not a great thing to say right in front of your management, right? And all these customers standing around. And what she probably meant, and she did say she had just graduated, is she couldn't find a job in Johnson City, in the area that she got a bachelor's degree, and she was disappointed, not realizing quite obviously that she could move up the ladder in the bank. She's already got an entry-level position, and the degree required to actually move to branch manager, regional manager, vice president, etc. And there she is shooting herself in the foot. Well, you know what? If you get a degree in a town that issues degrees in an area that's popular, it turns out it's going to be a tough job market. But if you're willing to go a little bit further afield, you can find jobs that you might want. But you might have to go further afield, as we'll see shortly. It may not be that you can graduate with a degree that everybody gets in that town and expect to go right to work in that area. But you might go to work in a related area, or you might make for yourself a career in another area with that as a baseline, or you might leave the area and find some other type of work. If you don't do some serious career planning up front, though, you're likely to wind up unsatisfied. If you're a psychology major, it's the most popular science major in the country. It's also the one with the greatest degree of dissatisfaction when people get out with their degree. And I think that's largely because people don't really do career planning. They kind of just go get the degree assuming things are going to work out, and they haven't really thought forward, what am I going to do with this degree when I'm done? I didn't. I fell into what I do kind of backwards. I was almost done with a philosophy degree when I was a senior and kind of realized that I didn't think anything about graduate education. I didn't know what it was really. And I came from I'm not a first generation college student. My dad had a master's degree. My mom had an RN. They were educated, but I didn't really know what they did because I rejected that when I was a teen. And when I finally got back into community college in my early mid-20s, and I got my degree and I did very well with my GPA, and moved over to the local university and got up to the senior level, I didn't really think about being a PhD because I didn't really know what one was. And if you'd asked me if I could be a doctor, I'd have said no. I didn't know what it took, but I certainly didn't think I had the capacity to do that. And somebody said, hey, you got a really good GPA. You could go to graduate school. And I thought, well, why would I do it? More money, more freedom, you get the picture. At which point I was like, well, maybe I should be in some other area. Psychology spoke to me, but I didn't really see myself going on beyond the bachelor's degree, even when I switched that major. And if I hadn't really come up against some interesting circumstances, I could have easily been down here in the disappointed group. But I did figure this much. Having come from a construction background, at least in my early work life, I figured if I could work indoors every day, that would rock. Like air conditioning would be nice. And if I could get like a salary every week and we don't get put off when it's raining, or we don't have the condition that my neighbor has, which is that housing starts are down, so he does carpet and there's no work for the next 2 weeks, right? If we had consistent paycheck, that would be cool. And if somebody gave me benefits like, health insurance, much less something like retirement, those things would be cool. And if I could do that in an area that I thought was fulfilling, that would be well worth it. And that's kind of what you got to think about. What am I going to do with this degree? And I figured if I could work, in the low mid-20s, that'd be making more money than I was ever accustomed to making, but I could do something that I was invested in, something I felt actually spoke to who I was, and it was fulfilling. And so you see that these satisfaction numbers are not great for any degree, right? And these are people, percentage of college graduates sorted by major answered satisfied or very satisfied. And so what you see is right down here, once we get to international business, it's less than a majority that say they're satisfied or very satisfied with their bachelor's degree. So my guess is it's a pretty common theme. Just like me, people don't think forward about what they want to do with their degree. If you don't have a plan, it kind of means that you're probably going to be bothered by what you get as a condition. Job satisfaction is not the same thing as making money. You can make money in a lot of areas that you don't even need higher education for. And there's no need to get it unless you see yourself as using it in some kind of a way. If you're motivated, you can do other things. Mental health and substance abuse workers, and this is taken from job salaries and based on the Department of Labor and Workforce 2006-2007, so it's not too dated. But you know, hey, the average is $37,900. That's across entire careers, but that ain't bad. Social science research assistant, $35,000. Social worker, $44,000. Those are jobs that require you to get a bachelor's degree at least to have them, right? You go down here, carpenter doesn't require that. I was a carpenter. You can make $39,000 a year being a carpenter. But if you don't have a calling to be a carpenter or a tradesperson, you're probably not going to be happy in that area. And I certainly didn't have a calling, and I wasn't happy doing it. I had a lot of respect for the people that were masters of their trades, but I wasn't about to become a master in any of these trades because I also then did drywall. And I hung ceiling tiles too, metal stud framing, and et cetera, et cetera. You can make $38,000 a year doing that. That's better than these. But these jobs come and go with the economy, with housing starts. They come with oftentimes low to no benefits, et cetera. Floor laying, I did that too, $39,000. Restaurant and wait staff, average of $17,000. You could do that too. Some people do that even after they got their bachelor's degree. But even then, they have the opportunity to apply for jobs while they're doing a wait staff job that they wouldn't otherwise be able to apply for. They couldn't get the job if they didn't have the degree. So you may not move straight into what you want to do, but if you're doing some career planning, you're more likely to move into the job you want to do. And you can have a fulfilling job doing clinical work, which is what I wanted to do. Helping people out is basically what clinical work is, at a bachelor's level in psychology, but it doesn't pay a lot, relatively speaking. So you have to be willing to work really hard, because it's going to be high stress, and not get paid a ton of money. But these are the most popular jobs taken from 2011-2012 pay scale, college salary report from payscale.com. Mental health technician. And so you can see, the most popular means these are the people, that's where most people are. And these are the pay levels, $30,000 on average. Mental health worker, there's not a whole lot of difference. Mental health counselor, there's some difference. Mental health case manager, resident youth counselor, substance abuse counselor, clinical research assistant, case manager for social services, clinical research coordinator, child, family, or school social worker. They may not pay a ton of money, but some of them pay pretty well. And most of them are pretty fulfilling jobs. So that's the freedom part. By getting the higher education, you get the freedom to do things you like. And as they like to say, or at least as I like to say, if you love what you do for a living, you never work a day in your life. You get to do your job. You don't have to do your job, and that's a blessing.